Stop stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. You are agonizing over a 0.1% difference in fees, but you're missing the 8% growth happening right in front of your face. You are winning the battle and losing the war. Does anyone else feel like the moment they finally figure out the rules of the game, the referee blows the whistle and changes the sport entirely? You spent 2020 hearing that cash is trash. You spent 2022 hearing cash is king. Now nobody knows what cash is, other than the fact that it buys you significantly less than it did when you started watching this video. Here is the reality of the current economy. It is an invisible treadmill. If you stand still, which is what overthinking actually is, you don't stay in the same place. You move backward, rapidly. The old rules used to say, measure twice, cut once. Be careful. Analyze the risk. Don't make a move until you are 100% sure. But those rules are dead. In an economy defined by high asset inflation and rapid technological turnover, measuring twice just means someone else cut the wood, built the house, and rented it back to you while you were still looking for your tape measure. Today, we are looking at the Overthinkers tax. I crunched the numbers so you don't have to, and the data is terrifying. It shows exactly why the dumb guy who just works hard and executes is lapping the genius who is paralyzed by strategy. Let's look at the damage. We have this massive misconception that wealth is an IQ test. We think that if we just consume enough podcasts, read enough threads on Twitter, and watch enough deep dive videos, we will optimize our way to wealth. This creates a specific demographic called the Henrys, high earner, not rich yet. The Henry is usually smart. Too smart. They suffer from analysis paralysis. They have $50,000 sitting in a checking account earning basically zero because they are terrified of putting it into the market at the wrong time. They have a business idea that is objectively brilliant, but they've spent 3 years building the logo and 0 days selling the product. Here is the data point that should scare you. The cost of waiting for perfect conditions is almost always higher than the cost of making an imperfect mistake. Let's run a simulation. Let's say you have $10,000. Person A is the overthinker. They wait 3 years to invest because they think a crash is coming. They keep it in cash. Inflation runs at an average of 4%. In purchasing power terms, they have lost roughly $1,200. They paid over $1,000 for the privilege of being safe. Person B is the hard worker. They put it in the market immediately. The market drops 10% the next week. They lose $1,000 on paper, but they keep buying. They keep working. 3 years later, the market recovers and gains 8% annualized. The hard worker won. Not because they were smarter. In fact, they bought at the top. They won because they were in the arena. The overthinker is still in the stands, reading a book about gladiator techniques. The goalposts have moved. You can no longer afford the luxury of hesitation. Income is not wealth. Action is the only mechanism that converts income into wealth. I want to break this down by levels. I've looked at the data across 3 tiers of wealth building to show you exactly where the overthinker gets slaughtered and the hard worker wins. Level 1 is the first $100,000. This is the velocity phase. At this level, the overthinker is obsessed with hacks. They're trying to find the crypto coin that does 100x. They are trying to drop ship without doing any work. They're looking for leverage before they have anything to lever. The hard worker? They just increase their inputs. Let's look at the math. If you have $5,000 to your name and you spend 100 hours researching how to get a 10% return instead of a 7% return, do you know what you have generated? $150. That is your hourly rate for being a genius, $1.50 an hour. The hard worker spends those 100 hours driving Uber, freelancing, or working overtime. They make $2,500. The hard worker is now winning by a factor of 16. At the bottom 50% of the economy, brute force beats strategy every single time. You cannot optimize zero. Level 2 is the $1 million mark. This is where we talk about time in the market versus timing the market. This is where the smart people really lose money. There's a famous study from Schwab on market timing. It compares an investor who buys immediately every year versus an investor who has God mode and buys at the absolute lowest point of the market every single year. Over 20 years, the difference in their returns is negligible. It's barely a few percentage points. But here's the kicker. You don't have God mode. You're not going to buy the bottom. You're going to miss it. And if you missed the 10 best trading days of the S&P 500 over the last 20 years, your returns get cut in half. The overthinker tries to time the entry. They read macroeconomic reports. They worry about the yield curve. Result? They miss the 10 best days because they were too scared to click the buy button. The hard worker automates a transfer on the first of the month and goes back to work. The dumb automation strategy outperforms the PhD level analysis because it removes the single biggest point of failure in the financial system, your brain. Level 3 is the multi-million-dollar level. This is about imperfection. The overthinker writes a 40-page business plan. They file the LLC, they get the trademark. They worry about scaling issues for a company that has 0 customers. The hard worker sells the product before it exists. They deal with the chaos. They embarrass themselves. Look at the early versions of any billion-dollar company. Amazon, Facebook, YouTube. They were ugly. They were broken. If the founders had overthought the design, they would have missed the window. The data suggests that speed of implementation is the #1 predictor of success in the digital economy, not quality of idea, speed of implementation. But let's step away from the spreadsheets for a second. I want to talk about how these two people live, because being an overthinker isn't just expensive for your wallet, it's expensive for your soul. I know the overthinker. I used to be the overthinker. The overthinker lives in a state of constant low-grade anxiety. They feel like they are working because their brain is spinning, but they have no output to show for it. This is called productive procrastination. You are researching the best gym workout for 3 weeks, but you haven't done a single push-up. You sleep terribly because your brain is trying to solve a variable that cannot be solved, the future. Now, look at the hard worker, the executor. They sleep like a baby. Why? Because their system is simple. It's binary. Did I do the work today? Yes. Did the auto-invest trigger? Yes. They have a fortress of solitude. They accept that the market might crash. They accept that their first business product might suck. They have made peace with imperfection. The overthinker is trying to play 4D chess against the economy. The hard worker realizes the economy is actually a game of hungry hippos. You just need to grab as many marbles as you can as fast as you can. But here's the twist, the secret that the data doesn't explicitly show you but implies heavily. The reason overthinkers lose isn't because they are cautious, it's because they are arrogant. Stick with me on this one. To think that you can time the market, predict the recession, or build the perfect business on the first try requires a massive amount of ego. You're assuming you know something the market doesn't. You are assuming you can outsmart millions of other participants. The hard worker is humble. The hard worker says, I don't know what the stock market will do next week, so I'll just buy it anyway. The hard worker says, I don't know if this YouTube thumbnail is perfect, so I'll just post it and see what happens. This brings us to the law of large numbers. Volume negates luck. If you take 1 shot, you need to be a sniper. If you take 10,000 shots, you can be blindfolded and you'll still hit the target. Overthinkers try to be snipers in a machine gun war. That is why they lose. Wealth is not a function of how well you predict the future. Wealth is a function of how many experiments you can run per year. The overthinker runs 1 experiment every 2 years because they are afraid of failure. The hard worker runs 10 experiments a month. Even if 9 of them fail, the one that succeeds pays for everything. The math is undeniable. So
So I've got bad news. You're probably overthinking right now. You're watching this thinking, that's a good point, but you aren't going to change anything. You are going to go back to researching the optimal strategy. So I'm going to give you 3 steps. If you don't do them, admit to yourself that you like being stuck. Step 1 is the good enough audit. This is for the beginners. Identify one financial decision you have been sitting on for more than 30 days. Maybe it's opening the Roth IRA, picking the ETF, or canceling that subscription you don't use. Give yourself 24 hours. If you haven't decided by tomorrow night, flip a coin. Seriously, a 50-50 decision executed today is worth more than a 100% perfect decision executed next year. Step 2 is the boring automation. Stop trying to be a hedge fund manager. If your net worth is under $1 million, your alpha comes from your savings rate, not your stock picking skills. Set up an auto transfer for the day after your payday. Make it painful. If it doesn't hurt, you aren't saving enough. Then delete your brokerage app from your phone. You don't need to check it. Step 3 is the input shift. If you are trying to build a business or side hustle, stop measuring research hours. Start measuring output units. Don't tell me you spent 5 hours working on your business plan. Tell me you sent 50 cold emails.